Hey everybody, it's Alison Heikkila. Thanks so much for joining me today. We're going to do a pretty basic card today, but using a lot of scraps. I'm starting off with a piece of cheapo cardstock that is 3.5 by 5, and I'm going to just pull out this bag of strips that I have. I keep this right by my desk, and whenever I'm chopping down panels that I've worked on, whether they're ink smushed or stenciled or embossed or whatever it is, look at how pretty that one is. I put them in that little bag and I save them for a time like this when I want to just make something quick and use up some scraps and just kind of play without thinking too hard. You don't have to do a whole lot of work or a whole lot of thinking when you're making a card like this. So I decided to go with warm tones for this card, and I'm going into my orange drawer that has all of my orange pieces of cardstock and pattern paper. And I'm just going through and I'm trying to supplement some additional strips that might be bigger than the ones that I already have as far as length goes, because some of them need to really reach far across the piece of cardstock. And they might not fit because I'm going to do them at a diagonal. I find that if I work at a diagonal, I don't need to be quite as perfect. Once you start stacking these strips together, it's super easy to continue along. But working on a straight line, like going exactly horizontal or exactly vertical, sometimes things get a little wonky. So I figure if I started a diagonal, things are already wonky and we're good. So I have this old piece of basic gray paper. You're going to see a few pieces of basic gray paper pop into this video that I'm starting off with, because it's just going to fill my corner really nicely without using some of the cool strips that I made myself. I like using pieces that I didn't make in the corners sometimes, because then I'm not, I guess, wasting the good stuff that I've done myself. So I have a couple of strips that have some green in there, and you'll see later on that I think that I want to work with some more green, but it turns out I really don't. You'll see later on what I'm talking about. But I really wanted this card to have warm tones, but I liked having those little pops of green here and there too. So you'll notice that I make sure that all of my strips go past the edge on both sides. You have to watch those corners. Sometimes they get a little close. See how that one's a little too short. That one's a little too short too. But you have to really make sure that you get past the edge, because if you don't, you're going to have some white cardstock showing or whatever light color that you use on your base layer. It's just easier, in my opinion, to work on a separate piece of cardstock before you put it on your card base, because then I can shift things around if I need to, whatever. But always make sure that your strip goes past the edges. And I really want to work with that one strip, and I wind up not using it at all. I keep picking it up, that little one that has like those streaks on it, but it winds up just not working in the end. So this is some more basic gray cardstock. I love using this stuff. Oh my gosh. I've been hoarding it for so many years. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is your dimensions may be different. They may vary from piece to piece. Some of this is copy paper, some of this is heavyweight cardstock, some of it is Bristol, and occasionally, depending on the patterns that you're using, it may show some space in between. So just keep that in mind. A lot of the papers that I'm using here have some bits of white or are very pale, so you really don't see anything like that with this. But keep in mind, if you're making a card like this and you keep seeing space in between, it's probably because the thickness of your papers are varying. So now we have this hot mess of strips, and we're going to just trim this all off. Save some of these pieces, not all of them. Some of them are like just way too small. But, you know, there are some pretty good chunks here that can be used at a later date. So those little corner pieces are going to go right into the recycle bin, but some of these other longer strips are perfectly fine to use later on, or, you know, even on another card just like this one. So here we go. We have a thank you die. Because there's so much happening with this card already, I wanted to use a very clean and simple die. The font itself is nice and clean, and CZ Design always hits it right on the mark with something like that. It's the perfect font just to keep things kind of chill, and not go too crazy with, you know, confusing the eye. So here's the green. I thought, I wanted to pull in the green. Originally, when I made this, I was like, I'm staying with warm tones, no cool tones at all. But then that green was popping, and I was like, let's give it a go. Well, I'm not a fan. I don't like it. We're going to save this card base for another time. I had some mowed lawn and some residual ink on my blending brush, and then I bring in some rustic wilderness, and it's just too much. I don't like it. So instead, I wind up grabbing some mustard seed and some wild honey, and that works out exactly how I had originally envisioned. Sometimes you just shouldn't stray away from your original thoughts. Sometimes it's okay to experiment and go past what you were thinking, but in this case, the original idea was the best one. So there's the wild honey, and it warms it up so nicely, and it's exactly what I wanted it to look like. And I don't add any embellishments or anything crazy on this one, just that little bit of ink blending with that layer of strips and that very cool sentiment, and that's it. Super duper easy, but you use a lot of stuff. And keep in mind, I varied my patterns and I varied the strip widths just to keep it interesting and not make your eye too crazy. Varying the pattern size and the strip size and all of that really helps with keeping your eye moving across the piece and not getting stuck in one area. Isn't that a fun card? It's a fun card. I love it. And I used a bunch of my scraps up. So I hope you learned a couple of things today. Get out those scraps and play with them. Make a card like this and send it off to a friend. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd love it if you let me know in the comments, and I will chat with you all very soon. Be well, stay safe, peace out.